Jay, thank you for making time. It's great to see you as well. For people that don't know you, just say a bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, thanks, Fraser. So I'm Abbas. I'm Head of Local Knowledge and Intelligence Services in Public Health England. So I manage our regional footprint for analysts based around PHE's now 7 regions.
That's great. I'm particularly interested to talk to you at the moment, of course, the height of the pandemic. I'm particularly interested in your reflections as a public health professional, your perspectives from local government. There's going to be a lot of perspective that I think you'll bring to this. But my first question is sort of so broad, really. Could you just tell me a bit about the sources of value, the reasons why good analysis is important within health and social care?
Yeah, I think we talk about analysis. We talk about provision of information. I think that distinction of how we move from just providing summarized data, summarized information that may or may not be used into doing what we call analysis, I think is a really important distinction. I think when I've taught to colleagues across our organisation and with external stakeholders as well, I think, in terms of particularly around workforce development, just that provision, that basic provision of information just isn't enough anymore. I think this is against a backdrop of just a vast amount of data and information that's out there, and absolutely through things like increasing transparency just means there's going to be even more. So we know from our decision makers, from our leaders, that there's just so much information, there's so much data out there, and I think it's more important than ever to have the skills, the people who can rapidly, first of all, sift through what's important, sift through what's available to find out what's important, to look at evidence, to incorporate the use of soft intelligence, and to synthesize that so that it can be used to inform decision making. I think it's that ability to be able to rapidly appraise complex information and then to balance it with everything else that's out there in order to make decisions is more important now than ever. And if you think about the situation that we've gone through in the last 3 or 4 months, that is the challenge that certainly the government are facing, but local decision makers are facing on a day-to-day basis. It is a rapidly moving environment. The decisions that have to be made are based on information and analysis, but it places a real onus on both analysts themselves and the users of analysis to really up their game.
That's a really interesting reflection. So in a sense, I guess it's almost an intuitive or an obvious use of analysis to make decisions off the back of it, and kind of why wouldn't you? But I'd not thought at all about the point you make, which is to say, the supply of data is rapidly increasing. In a sense, the amount of noise has increased. Part of the job of the analysis or people doing the analysis is to actually act as a screen, a bit of a filter, to help navigate some of that increase in noise. That's a fascinating reflection.
Yeah.
I'm interested then in, so if that's the sort of potential source of value that we have as analysts, as an analytical community, how well used do you think analysis currently is in relation to decision making? So, good bits, bad bits in the round,
Yeah. And I think as you expect me to say, I think it's hugely variable, and the work that we've been involved in over the last couple of years, and what we've seen around the country has given us a much better understanding of the current state of play. And I think the interviews that you'll be doing and what you'll hear back on the day itself for the event, the Analyst Revolution event, will really flesh that out and provide us with a sense of the current situation. I think my take, analysis is often still really siloed within organisations. So in small teams, with little emphasis on skills development or sharing learning and having the infrastructure in place to effectively support that. But even where we've seen a corporate approach within organisations, the focus, with an organisational wide intelligence or analytical team is still very much around performance, business reporting, rather than what we see, what we'd like to see, which is providing insight and proactive analysis to inform the day-to-day work and strategic work of an organisation. So I think hugely mixed. I think it's changing. We've heard some really good examples, and I'm sure colleagues from some of those organisations will be contributors towards the event today. And I think, again, as I'm sure you'll have picked up, I think the current crisis has acted as a bit of a catalyst for some of the enablers that have helped us to rapidly progress. So the sort of things that we've seen happening around the country include including rapidly establishing those partnerships, and as ever, we'll probably come back to this, where the relationships exist and have been established, that's much more easy to progress. But partnership, data sharing, which, as you know, is a huge enabler and has been a huge obstacle and a challenge and remains a challenge for many systems. We've seen some rapid progress in areas to just make that happen because it's had to. And then, going back to the point I made before, decisions have had to be made, and it is. As somebody who's worked in analysis for 20 odd years, I think we've all faced that challenge of just being asked for more and more information. Paralysis by analysis, as we've called it, and actually times have meant we've had to make decisions. You've had to rapidly pull together what you know and make a decision based on it. And I guess more broadly, and we were just reflecting on this before the interview started, is that information, data and analysis are now front and centre. And that's not just in our professional lives, it's in our conversations we're having in the virtual pub after work, or with our friends and family. Who'd have thought they'd have been discussing our values on a Zoom call with their grandparents? It's strange times, but it is, the value of it, I think, is something that's much more in the public consciousness now. So even more than when we originally talked about this event, and the opportunity at a point in time, it feels like, if anything, that's ramped up further.
It really does. It really does. I mean, I think we're at the point now where we might have celebrity analysts as well, celebrity models.
Well, we've got, and again, it's a point we'll probably come back to. But the people who have been really powerful on television and radio have been it's that combination, isn't it, of having the robust scientific evidence, the background, but the communication skills. Those people who can make sense of this and talk about it in the media have been really powerful, and we've seen those, and there aren't that many, are there, actually?
No, that's excellent. And I want to ask you a related question. I mean, you guys have done some fabulous work in terms of mapping the analytical workforce, in terms of looking at the skills present within it, in terms of thinking about gaps that you would want to build on. So just some tremendous work to get a sense of what's there and where it might go. So could you reflect on the workforce for me? How well used do you think the analyst workforce currently is, and is it doing the right things? Has it got the right skills? Those kinds of things.
So yeah, I mean, as you know, we co-developed the skills mapping tools that we've been using with systems around the country that really have been a helpful part of just baselining and understanding what's currently there. I know you've got a contribution from colleagues who have been directly involved in that. I think we have a way of actually just describing the potential, and I think what's come out from that work has been just eye-opening view in any system that you're working with of the potential that's there in terms of the existing workforce, wherever they happen to be siloed, or whether there's any partnership within or between organisations in place. but it's also shown up some of the gaps in terms of skills and capacity, and we've talked. I talked at the start about this side, the presentation of information, summarized data not being enough anymore, and the gaps, the areas where we know we need to develop skills are both at the upstream technical end of things, but also around the downstream use of interpretation, application of intelligence for decision making. So we've got there's a lot going on around the development of skills in data science, in use of things like R, through analytical communities, and bringing in colleagues with those skills, I think is a real, feels like it's a real priority and something that's happening in lots of places at the moment. And then equally, just having the skills in place and having the people who can take the work out there, and particularly colleagues who can work at that most senior level, including board level, to really ensure that the intelligence that you're producing is used to drive and inform decision making. I think the skills mapping work is part of this. I think the tool, the work that Beautiful Information have done on the analytical capability index is really important part of that jigsaw as well. So even if you have an understanding of the capacity that you have, how do you evidence the extent to which the organisation is intelligence led? And the interviews with and information from boards is really, I think, is really interesting as part of that. So, can you evidence how the flows through the organisation, or the extent to which you've got day-to-day contact with intelligence leaders, or whether you have people at that level in the organisation with those sorts of backgrounds?
That all resonates incredibly strongly. There's two brilliant pieces of work there, I would say. I'm really interested in, and all of it resonates strongly with us, the development of technical skills, of course, but I'm particularly, I suppose, interested in what you were describing in terms of people who can lead analytical teams, who can do the interpretation work, who can be alongside the decision maker, who can be operating with the boards, that kind of thing. This thing we're calling the analyst as a leader. I'm really interested in any reflections you have about, the attributes needed to do that, the skills needed to do that, the extent to which we have people or roles that we can point to and say, yes, that's what it's like. Do you have any reflections on that?
Yeah, I think we have. I think there is I know the work that we've been talking about in this space in terms of your chief analytical officer idea, the work where you establish posts at board level with that responsibility. I think we've seen a lot of organisations, obviously with chief information officers and now chief technology officers as well, and I think one of my my reflection from that is that you, again, this is a generalisation, but you often end up with a real focus on the technical infrastructure and being at the cutting edge around things like IG and digital strategy for an organisation, but perhaps what you don't end up with is the same focus on really being at the cutting edge in terms of analysis, interpretation and intelligence-led decision making. And I know what we're looking at is how you build the capability at leadership level with that perspective as well. I think that's really important, and I know it's part of the thinking around today's event and some of the work that's going on alongside it. I also think, and again, this is something I know colleagues are working on. There is a parallel need to develop intelligence skills among non-analysts and decision makers themselves. So the ability to, as I alluded to at the start, with where we are working with decision makers in national, local government, senior NHS roles, the ability to rapidly appraise and understand and better frame questions and act as a customer, an informed customer for the analysis that you need to receive, I think are equally important challenges that we need to address. And I know there's been some great examples, the work that you guys have done in the Midlands with those sessions for for leaders specifically on the use of data, I think have been really interesting, really exciting example of the sort of work that we need to be doing around the country.
That's great. I mean, in a sense, we should declare some interest. I mean, the favourite people that we have to work with are the sort of analytically curious decision makers. You know, people who've got that sort of stock of good, interesting questions and know how the analyst can fit into that equation. That's great. I want to end then by asking you, what is to be done. So if we've talked about the value that analysis can have, we've talked about how well or otherwise it's currently used and the workforce. Also, in some of your answers, you were touching on things that we're doing at the moment in response to the pandemic that we might want to accelerate or at least keep hold of. Anyway, so where would you start? What would your agenda for development be if you were trying to improve the current situation?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I think a number of things that I know we've got already underway. So the response to the skills mapping in terms of the training opportunities. So providing more of a structured career pathway for people wanting to work in analysis roles, and how they connect up. So how do you, what are the different branches you might go down for a career in this sort of space, whether it's on the data science, programming, coding side of things, whether it's more on the communication of information and evidence, are all part of the same space, and we need all of those sorts of skills within this. I think for me there's something around recognizing that analysis isn't, and I probably come from a public health perspective here, but it isn't just a subspecialism of a wider professional grouping. It's a profession in itself, and you need people whose main business is intelligence and analysis working at board level alongside other roles at that level. I think the leadership and training posts are one of the ways to get into this. And I know you're probably talking about it elsewhere on the day, but developing a program which starts to develop people with leadership skills and have the posts into which they can go as part of that change is really important. I think putting that down, bringing that back down to more what you would do in a specific system. I think work that we're doing at the moment, which helps places look, not just at the people, but what's the architecture and system components that you need to do population health intelligence, to do an intelligence function across an area, I think is a really important area to take forward. So that's again the model that you'll be talking about today in terms of the DSU network, decision support unit network. I think the reason I'm particularly interested in it is that it does bring to life this idea of a tiered or scaled intelligence function that looks to make the best use of scarce skills at appropriate levels within a system. So how do you build something that enables you to access, I don't know, economic appraisal skills as and when you need them, rather than having them thinking you would need to employ them in every local organisation as an example, as one example, but equally scaling what you do at which levels, and then having really effective mechanisms to connect, to learn from each other, to bring in capacity, and to enable colleagues coming into an organisation to get experience of working in different environments and at different levels. I think is something we could potentially do through that approach. And as I said at the start, I think where we've seen these things working and where they've worked as part of the response to the crisis that we've been through over the recent months, relationships are absolutely key. And where they have been established, I'd like to think that the areas where we've helped build some of the relationships between the analytical community have actually enabled them to respond in a more effective way, because you know the people, bluntly, you know them, you've met them, you're able to pick up the phone and actually get over some of the issues and some of the nervousness and that the organisations would have had prior to that. What else needs to happen? I think we do need to do more work around the tools themselves and the products, and I think, as I said, that's a rapidly evolving space. We're working nationally on trying to continuously improve the suite of products that we develop, so they can be really picked up and used for decision making, and you can improve functionality through things, so that you are able to present alongside summarized data. You can present summarized evidence alongside it. You can enable non-technical users to manipulate and actually interrogate data to inform the decisions that they're looking to make. But equally, as part of that, we are very conscious, and it's a message we've been trying to get across to in recent months, is that the technical solutions are only part of it, and actually you need skilled people at all levels of the system, coming back to what I said at the start, who are able to take, appraise, synthesize and sit alongside and with decision makers to actually use this stuff in a live, pressured environment.
No, that's great. That really rounds it off very nicely. We're back to where you started from, aren't we? This very data-rich environment, which in fact could be confounding if it's not got the interpretation, the understanding, the filtering skill within it to get some signal in amongst all the noise. Jake, I've really enjoyed interviewing you. Thank you ever so much for your time today. Thank you very much for your thoughts. And yeah, well, thank you. Full stop.
Great. Thanks, Fraser.
Cheers.